Hello, Tammy here, and welcome to this tutorial. So I have Malibu over here and Sanibel over here, and both dolls are modeling the super cute dress I'm going to show you how to make. I'm calling this the Blythe Boho Beach Dress. If you joined us during the Virtual Blythe Retreat 2023, then you'll recognize this pattern. However, I have done a few modifications to it and also added a Middie size version of the pattern as well. And I'm selling the pattern along with a full color photographic tutorial available through my Etsy shop. I also might sell this on eBay as well. Links are provided down in the description below. Along with the pattern, you will need some basic sewing supplies and some cotton fabric. As far as fabric goes, I recommend using something like a quilting fat quarter, okay? You definitely want to use cotton. This is going to be a dress that has some rough edges to it on purpose, and you will get that effect if you use cotton. If you use something like knit, like t-shirt fabric, that sort of thing, you're not going to get the same sort of effect. Also, you can see it's a little bit drapey, and so also the cotton works for that. If you get a fat quarter, if you have a fat quarter in your stash, then you'll have more than enough to make this. You probably could actually squeeze out a couple of dresses from one quilting fat quarter. Along with your choice of fabric, you're going to need some ribbon, okay? I'm using 1/8 inch ribbon. It's very thin, okay? Here's some example of it here. That is for you metric people, that's 3.2 millimeter, because she has a tie around the neck area, and there's a casing you're going to make and insert the ribbon through it to create the tie around her neck. Now you could also use hemp. You could also use maybe a strip of thin lace. That would look really cool, actually. I might even try that. So there's other things you can use besides the ribbon, but if you have a ribbon stash, now's the time to use it. And then you're just going to have some basic supplies like a measuring tape, and you're going to need some pins, needles, your sewing machine. If you want to use your sewing machine, you can also do this by hand. Fray check, just the regular miscellaneous sewing supplies that you would use for any type of sewing. Like I said, you can either use your sewing machine if you want, or you can do this by hand if you'd like to do that. It's a lot of straight stitching, so it's very possible to do this by hand if you want to do that. Here's a quick close-up of the dress on both dolls. This dress I actually managed to find scraps that were large enough in my scrap bin to use, and what was cool is because it'd been in there a while, it was already kind of rough around the edges. So I left it like that. When I made the ruffle, I just left the edge rough, and I really liked that look. For Malibu's, this was fabric that wasn't already rough, so I didn't hem it, but I cut it a little bit just to rough it up around the edges. And again, this is something that you can do with cotton fabric. If you use something other than cotton, you may not get this effect. Okay, it's just putting it out there. All right, so let's cut out our pattern and get to stitching. All right, I already have my pattern pinned down on my fabric, and I have another piece that's cut right here. So this is going to be the ruffle. This is a 2-inch wide by 15-inch long strip of fabric. Okay, this piece of fabric you're going to cut out, and you are not going to fray check this. All right, we want this to get frayed on purpose. All right, this is going to give us that boho feel. Okay, so whatever you do, if you want that boho look, don't fray check this. You'll find out why when I get to actually attach it to the dress. It'll make some sense then. All right, so cut out your 2-inch by 15-inch strip of fabric and set that aside. Then you're going to pin your pattern pieces, and there are 2 pattern pieces. So see how I folded over just this little section here of my fat quarter? This pattern piece is actually on the fold, and I pinned it down. This one is not cut on the fold, but I did fold the fabric in half so that I get 2 pieces. This is going to be the back. This is going to be the front. All right, so you want to pin those down and then cut them out. Some people will prefer to like put their pattern piece on there and draw around it with a pencil or pen. That's fine if you want to do that too, but this is how I do it. right, so I'm going to cut this out and I'll be right back. Okay, I cut out my fabric and I'm going to just take this pattern piece off here, and you can see that's going to be the front. Here's the back. You're going to cut 2 of these, as it says here on the pattern, and you're going to end up with 2 back pieces. All right, so it's probably starting to make a little sense for you now. All right, so at this point, before I keep cutting and sewing and all that good stuff, the next step I'm going to do is something that it is not really required if you don't want to do this, but I prefer to finish the edges, the inside edges of fabric when I'm sewing. I do this for people clothing and I do this for dog clothing. It just makes a little bit of a finished feel to your piece when you're done. But if you don't want to do that, that's fine. I'm going to be using fray check. Okay, I'm going to put this on a piece of tin foil. I like to use tin foil because then it won't stick. Yay. So I'll put this on a piece of tin foil and carefully put fray check all around all the edges, and then I have to wait for it to dry. If you are not into fray check but you still want to finish the edges and you have a sewing machine, you could do a small zigzag stitch all the way around. I did that for many years before I started using fray check. So fray check takes a light hand, so it can be a little bit, you know, a pain, but once you get used to it, I am a fray check lover now, I've got to say. So we're going to do that, let it dry. Again, these are the 3 pieces you're going to finish off. You are not going to finish off your ruffle piece. This you want nice and boho-y, okay? You want it to be kind of ragged. And so yeah, that's the next step, and I'll be back to show you how to assemble this. Alright, so my fray check has dried on the edges, and I'm getting ready to stitch here. So I am going to line up, again, this is the front and these are the back pieces. All right, so if you can see, this is how it kind of goes together like this, with right sides facing each other. We're going to do one side first. All right, get up there. I'm going to measure 2 inches from the top to place my first pin. All right, and I'm just going to pin one more time. So using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, I'm going to stitch on my machine from here all the way to the end, and then I will be right back. All right, so I have made my stitch, again 2 inches from the top all the way to the end, and now I'm going to use my iron and I'm going to press this seam and continue to press it all the way up. All right, like this. I'm going to press it and I'll be right back to show you what it looks like. All right, done pressing it. Take a look. At this point in the video, things differ a little bit from the written instructions because I learned after making a bunch of these dresses, you don't really have to stitch down the top part of the pressed seam. However, I'm going to go ahead and show you how I did it in the video, and you can decide if you want to do this or not. Now I'm going to go back to my machine and I'm going to stitch just in the center of this little section right here, this little 1/4 inch section. I'm going to stitch from here to the end, and then from here to the end. Here is what it looks like after I stitched down these 2 sections. Now I'm going to repeat what I did with this section. I'm going to repeat it with this other part here. Again, right sides together. I'm going to pin them. I'm going to sew so that I leave 2 inches here. Then I'm going to press it open, and then I'm going to do the stitching here on these little extra pieces, and I'll be right back. All right, so both sections are stitched at this point. Okay, now the video tutorial starts to match back up with the written tutorial. You're going to measure about a 1/2 inch, fold it over, 1/2 inch. And pin it. And you're going to do the same with this section and the same with this section. All right, I have it pinned and I'm getting ready to stitch. I did press this a teensy bit with the iron, but I'm going to now go on my machine and just stitch, leave a very small seam allowance here. You just have to go right about here. I don't know, what is, how big is that? There you go. So probably about 1/8 of an inch or so right across. Again, you're making a casing because you're going to put this, your ribbon or whatever you decide to put through the hole to create the neck part. You're going to put that through there. So make sure this is big enough for whatever you use. All right, casing's done. Just so you can see, we're not going to put the ribbon in there yet, but you can see there's plenty of room to put in my ribbon later, or whatever I decide to put in there if I want to use something else. So yeah, so that's good to go. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make the ruffle. So that you're going to get your 15 by 2 inch piece of strip of fabric that has not been fray checked. See how it's starting to get ravelly there? So that's fine. And I'm going to go back to my machine and I'm going to do a basting stitch across the top, 1/4 inch across the top, basting stitch, okay? And leave the strings because we're going to gather it together. Right, my basting stitch is done, and now I'm just going to take one of the strings here, one of the threads, and pull. You're going to gather it on both sides. Gather, gather, gather. When you get some of it gathered, you want to start measuring it against the piece that you were already working on. This is really the dress, and this is a ruffle that we're adding to it. Typically, what you would do normally is you would put sides together and then flip it over, but we want all this roughness, okay, because it's a boho dress. So we're going to leave it, we're actually going to sew it to the front. So once you get it all gathered, take a few minutes, and I'm not going to do this on camera because it'll take a while, but this is probably the most difficult part of this whole pattern, is you're going to make sure that your gathers are as even as possible, and you're going to pin it on top of your dress so that the fabric is facing you, not the back of the fabric. The front of the fabric is facing you. So I'm going to take a minute off camera, make sure my gathers are as even as I can get them, and pin this onto this. And I will be right back after I do that. All right, I'm back. I used lots of pins. I was generous with my pins, okay? It's up to you to do what you want to do. Some people can just finger pin this where they hold it, and that's fine if you want to do that. But this is a little tricky because, like I said, you're doing the ruffle kind of opposite. You're putting it on top. But plus, you have to make sure that you have some of the fabric here. See that? You have to make sure this fabric is covering the ruffle part, and you can't really see that when because you're gonna sew on the top. Typically you would sew behind it, but you're not doing that because you want that ruffle, ruffle on the top. So yeah, hopefully that makes some sense. So when I feed it into my sewing machine, I'm going to be feeding it in this way on the top. So yeah, see, we're getting lots of little pieces here. Of course, if you do not want this rough boho-ness to it, you can do it like traditionally is done. But this is all part of the look of the dress. So this is, to me, kind of what makes the dress in the first place. But that's up to you. So I'm going to stitch across there and be right back. All right, my ruffle is attached to the dress now. All right, so you'll notice that the edge here isn't super ravelly yet, okay? And there's a couple of ways you can go about doing this. You can just kind of let it do it naturally and pull a little bit here and there. Eventually it will just over time do it. But if you want to kind of speed things up a little bit, you can get a string and just pull on it. Okay. You can start to see how it's See how you're getting that sort of roughness? That's what I like. I like this. Another thing you can do is to speed it up. And actually I did that on this one here. I actually took my little clippers and I just clipped along the edge randomly all the way around. And that will also give you that little rough look and kind of start it off sooner for you, so you don't have to just wait for it to do it naturally. All right. So that said, now we're going to stitch it together. So you're going to fold it over like this, just fold it in half, have the edges meet, pin it. Okay. Again, we're going to use 1/4 inch seam allowance when we stitch it up. But you're not going to stitch it to the end because remember you have those casings there. So you got to make sure that you don't close those up, all right? All right. So we're going to end it right there. So I'm going to go back on my machine and I'm going to stitch a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way down here again, but starting right under the casing. Right, I've sewn it up. Now I'm going to turn it inside out. How cute it is. I love this fabric. All right. And yeah, you got some little raw edges. I'm okay with that. I want it to get ravelly. Sanibel's back. Okay. You can see I have it tied on the side. You could tie it in the back if you'd prefer. Okay. But I like the look of it on the side. I think that adds a little something cute to it. So your choice. I'm going to add a safety pin to the end of my ribbon and start inserting it through the casing, the front. Insert it, insert it. Alrighty. And then go through the 2 back casings. Alrighty. You can see you can drawstring it up. That's the top. That's the top. And one little thing I've done, okay, is because you don't want this to come out all the time, I recommend putting a knot on the ends of your ribbon. Easier said than done. But yeah, put a little overhand knot on the ends. I think that also kind of adds to the look a little bit. I'm going to put an overhand knot on each one. So tiny. And there is the finished dress. Alrighty. Let's put it on a dolly and see what she looks like in it. In fact, let me show you how to put it on her, because you got to get her arm through that hole and that hole there. Those are the armholes. Okay. Those are the armholes. That's why you don't stitch it up all the way. And then you're just going to tie a knot, or I tie a little bow on the side. And here is Malibu modeling it for you. All right. All right, you guys, let me know if you have any questions. I hope you are successful with this and that you enjoyed this little tutorial for the Blythe Boho beach dress. Bye-bye.